Hello, my name is Austin Habish, the founder of Think Catholic, and you're listening to the Summa podcast, where we study St. Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologiae in a way simple and insightful for anyone to understand. The Summa podcast is brought to you by Think Catholic. Taking 2 questions of the Summa a day, we'll seek to summarize St. Thomas's responses, discovering the brilliance of Aquinas and his Catholic faith. This is day 26. So let's get started. We're covering today questions 49 and 50 of the Prima Pars, that is, the cause of evil and the substance of the angels. The translation that I always use in these podcasts is the Second Revised Edition, translated by the Fathers of the English Dominican Province. And so here we go. Article 1, can good be the cause of evil? Remember our definition of goodness from episode 4. The essence of goodness consists in this, that it is in some way desirable. Being under the aspect of desirability, being as considered to some will, is goodness. In reality, goodness and being are identical. So if we could rephrase this question, ask yourself, are existing things the cause of evil? And the answer is yes. For an evil man to murder, he must exist. The actions which cause the murder, these things must also exist. The murderer's being, his actions considered as existing, are good, but considered as lacking some rectitude in the will, which they ought to have, makes these actions in this man evil. Is good the cause of evil? Not directly, because again, evil in itself is just a missing, an absence, a privation of virtue or right intention. Absences don't have causes because they don't have being, which is why Dionysius says in this article, evil has no cause. But then Aquinas responds, there is no possible source of evil except good. Both of those statements are true, and it is the purpose of this article to show both that they are true and not contradictory together. Evil has a cause because there must be a reason why there is an absence in this evil man's intention or in his actions, but the absence itself does not have a cause because it is just that, an absence. In Aquinas' words, for evil is the absence of good, which is natural and due to a thing, but that anything fail from its natural and due disposition can come only from some cause, drawing it out of its proper disposition. Therefore, we can say, yes, some good or some existing thing can be the cause of evil or missing things in others. Good can be the cause of evil. Article 2, whether the supreme good God is the cause of evil. Here we will have to distinguish, like we did in the previous article, evil essentially as the privation of the good God cannot be the cause of, because evil as an absence has no cause, has no being. Strictly speaking, here we hear the words of the Book of Wisdom where it says, do not invite death by the error of your life, nor bring on destruction by the works of your hands, because God did not make death, and he does not delight in the death of the living. And Aquinas says, the evil which consists in the defect of action is always caused by the defect of the agent, but in God there is no defect, but the highest perfection. Hence the evil which consists in defect of action, or which is caused by defect of the agent, is not reduced to God as to its cause. Yet on the other hand, if we go further and ask, is God the cause of this evil murder, not in regard to its missingness, privation of the will, or defect of the action, but according to whatever being, goodness, and truth is around it or annexed to it, like the murderer's continued existence, yes, he is the ultimate and principal cause, as we know, because he is the uncaused cause of all things. Here we hear the words of the book of Isaiah, where it says, I am the Lord and there is no other God, forming the light and creating darkness, making peace and creating evil. And then in Amos chapter 3, verse 6, shall there be evil in a city, which the Lord hath not done? Aquinas then explains, God does not will death for its own sake. Nevertheless, the order of justice belongs to the order of the universe, and this requires that penalty should be dealt out to sinners. And so God is the author of the evil which is penalty, but not of the evil which is fault, by reason of what was said above. And as human beings, under the just withdrawal of unending life by original sin, as well as the punishment surely to come, either in this life or in the life to come, for each one of our own personal sins, we can never say that we are being treated unfairly, no matter how bad things get. As Job understood all too well, he said, "A form was before my eyes, there was silence, then I heard a voice. Can mortal man be righteous before God? Can a man be pure before his Maker? Even in his servants he puts no trust, and his angels he charges with error. How much more those who dwell in houses of clay, whose foundation is in the dust, who are crushed before the moth. Between morning and evening they are destroyed. They perish forever without any regarding it. For affliction does not come from the dust, nor does trouble sprout from the ground, but man is born to trouble, as the sparks fly upward." Article 3, whether there be one supreme evil, which is the cause of every evil. Here Aquinas will contrast the Christian religion with what is normally termed dualism. It will always be tempting, possibly in every generation, to try and solve the problem of evil, why there exists a good God and evil in the world, by simply positing a second God, a second evil God, just as powerful as the first yet evil, and then to say that the struggle between the two is the cause of evil in this world. But there can only be one God, which was the subject of episodes 3 and 7, and there definitely could never be some completely evil anything, because evil, as the absence of the good, if it was pure and unmixed with any good thing, it would simply be nothing, non-existence. Pure evil equals non-existence. That follows from the definition of evil as well as the definition of good, which is being, but under the aspect of desirability. Aquinas responds to this article saying, "The supreme good, or we could say the primary first good, is the cause of every being. Therefore, there cannot be any principle opposed to it as the cause of evils." Aquinas will continue explaining, "Those, however, who upheld two principles, one good and the other evil, fell into this error, because they failed to consider the universal cause of all being, and considered only the particular causes of particular effects. If they found a thing hurtful to something by the power of its own nature, they thought that the very nature of that thing was evil. As for instance, like if one should say that the nature of fire was evil because it burnt the house of a poor man. The judgment, however, of the goodness of anything does not depend upon its order to any particular thing, but first, rather, upon what is in itself, and second, on its order to the whole universe, wherein every part has its own perfectly ordered place." And with that, we proceed to our next section in the Summa, which is the angels. Here Aquinas gives us a prelude to this section as well as the two other sections which will follow it by saying, "Now we consider the distinction of corporal and spiritual creatures. Firstly, the purely spiritual creature, which in Holy Scripture is called angel. Second, the creature wholly corporeal. Thirdly, the composite creature, corporeal and spiritual, which is man." First question, whether an angel is altogether incorporeal. Incorporeal is the technical term for not bodily or not material. First of all, do angels exist? And I would say, setting aside revelation, since God exists, who cannot be perfected, then the only reason for anything else to exist would be to manifest God or to glorify Him. And without angels, there would be a categorical hole in that manifestation. It would go from God, existence itself, to limited, destructible material stuff, which is us, everything down here. But what about non-material stuff? If God is interested in manifesting Himself, which He obviously is, He's not going to do it in a haphazard, incomplete way. And without incorporeal creatures, that goodness would not be manifested in an entire category of being. And the best kind of beings to manifest God's goodness, because they are much closer to God in their being than anything else. Therefore, it is reasonable to conclude, and by reason alone, that angels exist. Aquinas in this article will put it this way. He says, "There must be some incorporeal creatures, for what is principally intended by God in creatures is good, and this consists in assimilation to God Himself. And the perfect assimilation of an effect to a cause is accomplished when the effect imitates the cause according to that whereby the cause produces the effect, as fire makes other things that are on fire. Now God produces the creature by His intellect and will, hence The perfection of the universe requires that there should be intellectual creatures. Now, intelligence cannot be the action of a body, nor of any corporeal faculty, for every body is limited to the here and now. Hence, the perfection of the universe requires the existence of an incorporeal creature. Then, according to Revelation, the psalmist affirms the existence of angels. In Psalm 104, he says, he makes his angels spirits. Angelus, or angel in the Latin, simply means messenger, so angels are incorporeal messengers. They are entirely immaterial, intellectual substances. Our next article, whether an angel is composed of matter and form. Now, what do these words mean? I will simply repeat what we said in episode 2 on matter and form, where we encountered it as a question in regard to God. So to quote here, Werner Heisenberg, Nobel Prize winner, especially for his work in quantum physics, he says, regarding the Aristotelian concepts of matter and form, we can say that the matter of Aristotle, which is mere potential, should be compared to our concept of energy, which gets into actuality by means of the form when the elementary particle is created. So physicists like Werner Heisenberg are trying to find the absolute bottom of material stuff. What is the most fundamental thing which everything material is made up of? Now, Heisenberg thinks that's energy. It may very well not be energy. There's good reasons for thinking it wouldn't be, but whatever it is, at that very bottom of which all material things are made up of, that's what Aristotle means by the term matter. That's what we mean by the term matter, that thing that doesn't even exist actually, but is just pure, sheer potency or potential existence, which in order to come into actual existence must have some cause. That cause we call its form. You and I have a particular form or nature or essence, that innermost structuring cause of you and I's particular material. That form for you and I that is giving this innermost structure to our particular material, what Heisenberg would call our energy, is the soul. Is an angel made up of a form, essence, nature, or innermost principle, structuring cause for its existence, plus material? And the answer is no. An angel, by definition, has no material. Then how can it exist? Well, it exists the same way your soul exists. It has its existence from He who is existence itself, God, who is imparting existence to your particular form or your soul, just like the angels, at any moment. Aquinas will prove that an angel does not have material by proving that the mind is not material and that angels are simply immaterial, intelligent things. He writes, it is further impossible for an intellectual substance to have any kind of matter, for a thing is understood according to its degree of immateriality, because forms that exist in matter are individual forms, which the intellect cannot apprehend as such. Hence, it must be that every intellectual substance is altogether immaterial. Now, that's probably the most concise proof for the mind you will probably ever run into. And so, if I could explain that proof, if I could put Aquinas' words in different words, think of it like this. You and I have a capacity for abstract thought, so that even though we have never seen nor can imagine things like love or peace or justice, we still know what they are. Now, obviously, you and I, we have seen and we can imagine particular instances of them, particular examples of them, but what we know are not those particular instances or examples. What we know is the overarching, general, abstract notion of them, for which we can conjure up these particular examples of them, and by which we judge the world around us more or less akin to them. Now, for us to know these things, love, peace, justice, they must be in some way in us, but they cannot merely be in the brain, because whatever is material must also be a particular material thing, like the chemicals and the synapses of the brain. But what you and I know is not particular, but the general, abstract, the immaterial notion of love, peace, and justice. And we can do that because there is an immaterial aspect to us, namely the mind, a faculty of the soul. Now, if that was a lot in a small amount of time, don't worry, because we'll get into all of that again on Aquinas' treatment on man when we go over the soul and the mind specifically. Article 3, whether the angels exist in any great number. Well, it is written in the book of Daniel, chapter 7, thrones were placed, and one that was ancient of days took his seat. 1,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, which Aquinas takes to be the angels. Now, Aquinas' argument here is that since the perfection of the universe is intended by God, both material and immaterial things, then there should be more of the better kinds of things in it. And the best kind of things, short of God, is the angels, naturally speaking, and therefore there should be many of them. Aquinas writes, since it is the perfection of the universe that God chiefly intends in the creation of things, the more perfect some things are, and so much greater in excess are they created by God. Now, as in bodies, such excess is observed in regard to their magnitude or size, so in things incorporeal, it is observed in regard to their multitude. In brief, he is saying, if I could remove any Aristotelian cosmology that may be present here, look at the moon and the sun and the stars. Are they not, as far as the inanimate is concerned, the best kind of inanimate things here in the universe? And since they are the best kind of things, it is fitting that they be the most massive in size for the perfection of the universe. So too, the most perfect natures, short of God, would be the most intelligent and the most free from material restriction. These are the angels. So it is fitting that God would create the most of these kinds of things, the greatest number of these things than anything else. But the question then is, how can they be distinct since they're not material? Remember, you and I are distinct precisely because we have different material. Your body is yours, my body is mine. They are different, therefore we are different. So how does that work with the angels, which brings us to our next article, Article 4, whether the angels differ in species. Is every angel within one species? Let's say the species of angel, like you and I are of the species of human, or are they different species, like a rabbit is different in nature from a dog? And the answer is not only is each angel a different species than the other, but they have to be. Because, again, if they weren't, they would not be distinct. You and I, we share the same nature, essence, which we call human, and then differ because we have different material. But angels have no material. Therefore, for them to be distinct at all, they must be distinct by species. Aquinas writes, things as agree in species but differ in number, agree in form but are distinguished materially. So that's us, human beings. If therefore the angels be not composed of matter and form, as was said above, it follows that it is impossible for two angels to be of one species. How do they differ in species, since they are all identical in being incorporeal creatures? They differ, according to what Aquinas says, more or less in perfection, more or less similar to God. In this question, we're not saying by grace or love or imitation, but simply according to their nature. Are they more or less in being, goodness, oneness? And we could say the rest of the transcendentals as we've covered in previous podcasts. The last article of this episode, Article 5, whether the angels are incorruptible. Yes, because we destroy things by pulling them apart. Whether that's a tree or an atom or anything else, we separate the composite. What was a moment ago composed together, we pull into its individual pieces. Of things that are material, this means affecting the material until it loses its form, until the form can no longer inform that material. Think about how you kill a spider. You step on it, you affect the material until it loses that living form of spider. For us, the form of the body is the soul. So if the body is affected severely enough, it loses that form. the soul separates from the body, what we call death. But angels have no material, and therefore they cannot be taken apart. Their form cannot be separated from the material. They have no material. In Aquinas' words, it must necessarily be maintained that the angels are incorruptible of their own nature. The reason for this is that nothing is corrupted except by its form being separated from the matter. Hence, since an angel is a subsisting form, as is clear what was said above, it is impossible for its substance to be corruptible. Such is the end of our first episode on the treatment of the angels. We have just finished questions 49 and 50 of the Prima Pars, which is the cause of evil and the substance of angels. My name is Austin Habish with Think Catholic, and I cannot wait to see you tomorrow.